Hi everyone, thank you for being here. So we're going to introduce ourselves. First, we'll start with that. I'm Dr. Schury Peckham. I'm the flute professor here.
I'm Brenton Caldwell. I am the instructor of viola and violist in the Harrington String Quartet here.
Hello, I'm Chris Beach. I'm music therapy.
Brian Boehme, assistant professor of percussion.
Sarah Rushing, piano.
We're gonna start by telling just our brief histories with performance anxiety, so you can learn a little bit more about us and why we're up here talking to you about performance anxiety. So I've always had a lot of anxiety, and it was really bad in my undergraduate degree and my master's degree, and I had to work on with a lot of different strategies to manage it over time and handle it. But it was really, really bad at the end of my undergraduate degree. My performance anxiety was so bad, I didn't audition well for any of my master's programs the first time I tried, and I ended up taking time off after that and reapplying, and then I went to a great program and had a good time.
I've had performance anxiety ever since I picked up the viola for the first time. I'm continuing with it. Obviously, I've learned a lot about myself in the process. I think we're all gonna say I've gone through phases. You know, it's a process. I've been fortunate to study with some of the greatest musicians in our field and perform alongside them, and I've been very humbled to find out they too deal with performance anxiety.
When I was little, I didn't used to have performance anxiety up until around 7th grade, where I actually blacked out from performance anxiety. So it has been a very challenging and convoluted process in trying to navigate that. Even to where I'm at currently, I still feel a lot of anxiety that stem from that singular event. So trying to find just different ways to mitigate the anxiety and how those symptoms kind of manifest for myself has been a real challenge.
I've kind of dealt with performance anxiety just kind of continuously since I started performing, I think. And I've kind of had to learn how to sort of work alongside it, but especially in like my master's auditions, going up to play snare drum, and my hands were like already doing this before I started, and kind of having to learn how to deal with that, how to kind of prepare to be nervous for performances and just accept the nerves, something that's kind of a continuous process.
My first experiences with performance anxiety that I remember were probably around middle school. And it's been a constant throughout my education and my professional life. For me, to some extent, it has felt proportional to my level of experience. So the more degrees I earned and the more experience I had as a performer and the more respect I had as a performer, it seemed to get worse for a while. Of course, the coping strategies followed that, but it's been prevalent throughout my career as well.
Yeah. So we're going to talk briefly about the myths and misconceptions about performance anxiety. And I'm glad that we're talking about this right after Dr. Rushing just mentioned that, because one of the biggest myths of performance anxiety is that it goes away with time or with experience. And that doesn't happen. Or that, yeah, I know. Or that great performers don't get nervous, which is not the case at all. We've all just gotten really good at hiding it. I think we all look like cool as a cucumber on stage, but on the inside we're all a little, and that's just a part of managing it and dealing with it, coping. Does anyone else have any other myths or misconceptions they can think of?
I'd just like to piggyback off of that and normalize it a little bit more. I remember when I was a freshman in college, when I first learned that my own professor experienced performance anxiety, it was really shocking to me. I didn't realize that professionals also experienced that. And I've spent a lot of time page turning as a pianist. I've probably turned pages for 50 different pianists over the last 20 years, and many of them highly esteemed performance artists. And it's been really interesting seeing that everyone experiences this and copes with it in different ways, but I don't think I've ever encountered anyone who doesn't have any kinds of symptoms or problems with that.
You know, this is making me remember, I don't know if the Violin Channel still does this, but they would have 20 question series for like some really well-known violinists and string players, and one of them was Miriam Fried, who teaches at the New England Conservatory. I believe she was the first female to win the Queen Elizabeth competition, and one of the questions was, do you get performance anxiety? And you know, she's very serious and stuff, but even her question, she was like, who doesn't? So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I realized it at first either, because I had asked my master's professor. I studied with Carol Winsence, and you know, she travels around the world and performs, and you know, I studied with her at Stony Brook, but she also teaches at Juilliard, and she teaches like really well-known students as well who are all successful. And I asked her, like, how do you handle mistakes and you know, when you're on stage? And she's like, oh, you just keep going. What do you mean? You just keep going, you know? And I thought, oh, she's just acting like it's not, you know, mistakes aren't a big deal. You just keep going because everyone makes them. And I thought, oh, okay. So all of those feelings I have aren't, they don't have to, you know, I don't have to feel that way all the time. You know, but anything?
I think another big one is that there's a misconception that anxiety in and of itself isn't helpful. And that's not necessarily true. So it's about kind of balancing out how we can use the anxiety to motivate and kind of change our perspectives, and not just on how we think about things, but how we are kind of using that in terms of performance, how we are presenting ourselves in front of other people. So if we can learn to understand kind of like what Dr. Boehme was talking about working beside the anxiety, if we can use that connection, we can actually use it to improve ourselves.
All right, so I'm gonna go through I created a list of probably the most common questions that people have, and we're gonna talk about it. And then at the end, if you guys have any more questions, feel free to raise your hand at the end. All right, so how do you manage the mental aspects of performance anxiety, right? Negative thoughts, the spiral that happens after a mistake, both before, during, and post-performance. Anyone want to start?
Sure, I'll start. I think what helped me learn this the most was kind of the post-performance aspect of it. I remember one of my first ever faculty recitals, I was playing a vibraphone solo, and kind of about 30 seconds in, I was like, this is awful. I should probably stop right now. No one would know that it's not over yet. Then I watched it back like months later, because I couldn't really bring myself to watch it until like half a year later, and I was like, oh, that wasn't that bad. I was so focused in the moment on like everything that was happening that was incorrect, and then when I watched the video, I was like, a lot of it was correct though. So that kind of helps me now when I'm on stage. If something goes wrong, I'm like, well, I don't have to count all the wrong things. I can kind of count the right things that are happening as well. It helps me kind of keep a more positive mindset throughout.
I had a very similar experience in undergrad, listening to a recording of a performance that I remember not going very well. And it helped me to realize that perception is really important. I think many of us as musicians, and certainly pianists, we're very aware sensory-wise, and things can feel very different. I imagine it's the same with embouchure and things. Things can feel very different while you're performing, and only you are perceiving that, only you are aware of that. Often the performance itself isn't really suffering from it. And that was a very helpful thing for me to understand.
I like that. Like the perception of it, I think is really important. I went to a master class one summer, like a flute class, and the person performing, I was just sitting in the audience, and the person performing, you could tell their performance anxiety was just like getting at them from the inside, and I was like, I can so relate to you, but you can so do it. You know, you're just like rooting for them from the audience. And the clinician, Jeannie Baxtresser, was teaching, and she said, you know you're going to make a mistake, right? You're going to make one. And she said, I always feel relieved after I make the first mistake because I know I'm going to make one. So, there's nothing like that. You're halfway through a page and you're like, wow, it's going really well. What's going to happen? We've all been there.
You could make it half a page. Wow.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my, no, I'm thinking, see, the excerpt I'm thinking in my head is the Mozart concerto, which we play Mozart and it has to be like pristine. And so I'm thinking, oh, it's going well. And so she's like, I'm relieved. Then I can enjoy myself after that, or I can at least say, okay, the mistake happened, let's keep going. And I thought, wow, I really like that perspective. I never thought of it. I never thought to approach it that way.
I kind of want to add something. You mentioned being in the audience and kind of rooting for the person who was nervous. I don't think anyone comes to our concerts hoping that we're going to mess up. And sometimes it sounds like redundant, but once I kind of realized that, I was like, I think, like when I'm in the audience, I want people to do well on stage. And so like when we're on stage, it's kind of, we're our biggest critic and the kind of our worst enemy, I think, in that regard. So that kind of, once I started to discover that, like I think everyone out there wants me to do well. That's kind of, it helps to kind of, helps positive feelings.
Yeah, even something that's being adjudicated, whether it's a jury or competition or audition, the panel, wants you to do well. And, having been on both sides, I think we can all agree to that. I guess going off negative thoughts, I actually like to, I should probably do this more often, write them out because that gets them out of your mind, and replace them with something that is, gives you direction to look past the negative thoughts. Like, something, I can't play in tune. Everybody plays a little out of tune. I can actually play pretty well in tune. I'm not a robot. I actually I'm going to have a performance opportunity here in April. I'm soloing with you guys, playing the Forsyth Viola Concerto, and I've never played it before. I've taught it, but I'm already, having done that a few times, I'm like, okay, this starts right now, preparing for the performance. So every time I pick up my instrument to play it, I imagine looking at Dr. Bartley, walking out. I mean, it sounds obsessive, but if you build in the routine right away, mentally, physically, yeah.
Including, the part of the routine has to be, like, if you are someone that gets very nervous when you're on stage, you should be practicing bowing.
Yes.
Right? You should be practicing these kinds of things. Are you gonna shake hands with the conductor? Are you gonna, are you gonna cue to
You'll
your
see
pianist
who's practiced
to stand?
it and not.
Yeah. The amount of times before a performance, I'm like, okay, I walk out, I bow, then put my music. I always go through the same routine. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, then I think, what now?
One of the things that I used to do when I was a student and before music therapy ever entered my world is I intentionally practiced with mistakes. So I would actually purposefully play wrong notes, sing wrong rhythms, just so that I could practice navigating out of that to address the whole starting, stopping type thing that tends to accompany anxiety in performance aspects. One of my mentors at FSU would always tell us, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And I think that that's a good thing to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about mental aspects of performance. It's not about being necessarily perfect, because that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is the process. The purpose is getting there. So I use those kind of cognitive thoughts to address the anxiety.
I'd like to go back to something that was said about mistakes and sort of celebrating mistakes. I really like this idea, especially if the piece that you're performing is a piece that you plan to have a few months or years with. I tell my students all the time that mistakes are gifts, You know, if you're coming to your lesson and you're playing something from memory and you have a memory slip, that's great. That should be happening now. That's part of the process. And if you view that mistake as a gift, as an opportunity for knowledge of, oh, okay, I didn't realize that the foundation here was cracked, but now I know, no harm, no foul, and I can do what I need to solidify that foundation. Like, having that growth mindset about it is so important. Whether it's in a lesson or whether it's in a recital, you know, we have hopefully the rest of our lives with this repertoire that we can spend improving that foundation.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk next about the physical aspects of performance anxiety, right? How do we manage the physical aspects, right? Like, before I perform, I get the nausea. I get that like pit in my stomach where I'm like, I really feel like I might throw up, but I never do. But I feel it, you know.
Relatable.
And then when I'm on stage, I get the shaky breath usually. I feel like I'm shaking, but I'm not. But my air is unsteady. I usually, you know, before recitals, when I feel nauseous and that kind of a thing, I really like to practice my deep breathing. I turn on my favorite playlist that I'm feeling that day, right? All of the music we love, I like to turn on that. Usually my playlist is like Beyonce and something.
Mine too.
Something.
Britney Spears.
Yes, that's it. And I like to, you know, relax, deep breathing. If I'm in a place I'm comfortable, I just lay flat on the floor. Like constructive rest, like I'm flat on my back with my knees are up, right? I'm just breathing, I'm relaxing. If I'm somewhere where I'm not gonna lay on the floor, I usually just like hang, you know, I like stand up, but I usually like forward fold and relax and hang upside down for a little while, you know. But when I'm on stage, I usually do a lot of deep breathing, slow down, breathe through my nose, those kinds of things.
As some of you probably know, I am an avid exerciser, which has kind of been a recent thing. If you are exercising a lot, you will, your resting heart rate will be lower, I believe, and that, you know, you can tap into that more. I'm totally not saying that exactly correctly, but I read something like that, and I can attest that's very true. It's something I want to do more of as well, and we'll probably mention this later on, you know, deep breathing, you know, meditation or yoga, all these things, you know, they're all helpful.
I'll go a little anatomical for a second. The part of the brain that controls anxiety is the same part of the brain that controls the stress response. When a body is in anxious mode or is in a stress mode, the entire frontal cortex of your brain, which is responsible for decision making, shuts off. So using cognitive thoughts or reframing structures in those prime moments are not always beneficial. So using anything that is really sensory based, like listening to music, like exercising, doing that deep somatic bodily intervention like the breathing is going to be really important when it comes to being able to regulate the self. So any type of activity that you can do that does not deal with thinking is going to be helpful. And that's usually what I tend to stay with, is anything that gets me out of my head.
What he said. For me, a big part of it is kind of preparing to be nervous, I guess. Like if I know that when I'm on stage, I'm kind of going to be like shaky, and that's going to affect how I play or affect, you know, my accuracy on the instrument or something, then I want to kind of raise the stakes in the practice room. Turn the camera on, maybe set up my mics, which takes like a little bit of effort, just enough effort to kind of like, there's some investment there to where it's like, now I really got to play well for myself and my camera and my microphones. I might like do a little lap around the practice room or something, or do some push-ups. Like 1 or 2 is plenty for me. But I'm not an avid exerciser. but something to like get me to where, sort of try to match where I think I'm going to be when I just walk on stage without having done all that. Then it's like when if I'm on stage and I'm kind of feeling nervous, it's like it's not unfamiliar or unusual. It's kind of like, oh, I can still play with this sensation.
Yeah, I think replicating that feeling that you'll find on stage is so useful in your preparation. I agree with all of that. As far as coping on the day of or kind of preparing myself for it, I also find exercising to be really useful. I try to run the days that I perform. That helps lower my heart rate after the run and just gets me in a better headspace. When I was an undergrad and I wasn't a runner and I was not an avid exerciser, just being out in nature, like seeing the water was really useful for me. I lived in Louisiana at that time, it's a little easier. It's harder to find water here. But just some kind of peaceful, serene environment, rather than the chaos that life can be on the daily basis, finding some way to still and calm the mind a little bit.
Yeah, I think everyone has a different day of routine too. And it's really important to figure out what your routine is. Some people, like I like to stay busy on the day of because I don't like to, if I have too much time to myself, I'll think about it. So I don't like giving myself too much time. But I do know people who don't like they are the opposite. They need more time to themselves on days of performance. So, and I'm sure that, we've all figured out our day of routines.
And it can change over time as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So, how have you handled experiencing self-doubt or imposter syndrome? I've always struggled with this. I'm a people pleaser at heart, so this is something I've always struggled with. And it's something that actually kind of clicked for me recently in the last couple of years. I was really nervous for a performance, and my doctoral professor could tell, and she said, "Okay, what are you nervous about? Like, tell me. List the things you're nervous about." And I was like, "Well, I'm nervous I'm gonna mess up." And she's like, "Why?" I'm like, well, and then obviously you say, "Well, I don't want people to think lesser of me," or this is why usually it comes down to that. Right? We care about what other people think of us. And it's always really important. And she said, "Well, if you've you need to separate yourself from your music, right? If you make mistakes, that doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean you're not a hard worker. That doesn't mean you can't play the flute well. Right? It doesn't mean you're not going to be successful because you made that mistake." It's like separating who you are from the performer, right? And that kind of clicked with me. And from then she said, "Who cares, right? You work hard, so who cares what other people think in that moment? Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? They don't like what you did. Does it matter? I don't know." And I guess in that moment, after years of caring, I just thought, "Oh, wait, I guess I have worked really hard for a long time for this. Yeah, I guess I am my own human. I can think what I want about myself." So, yeah.
I still struggle with this a lot. Actually, for me, this aspect of it is quite dynamic. It kind of depends, on the day or whatever. Kind of similar along the lines of what you're going. One of my mentors told me that looking back, he would have saved himself a lot of grief and, self-doubt and frustration if he hadn't doubted what he was able to do. And I think I'm getting to that point in my career where I can look back and see that the bigger picture, how there were things in my life I thought they were just completely not attainable, and I've heard old recordings of me playing a few years before this, and I was like, I was actually closer than I thought to achieving that goal, and I did achieve most of those. So, yeah, it's tough. I really struggle with that one. I'm not gonna lie.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same place. I recognize the work that has been done and whatnot, but that still doesn't change the fact that things are still changing in our environments, in our worlds, our experiences. And every time something changes, that changes one little minute factor in trying to navigate this doubt, this imposter syndrome. So I don't necessarily take the same approach when I have to think about self-doubt and imposter syndrome as a lot of people do. I look at it as a motivational standard. To expect it as existing, it's going to happen, but that's symbol of growth. That's a symbol of things are always changing. It's not necessarily a representation of myself or my skill. It's a showing that things are continuously changing. They will always continue to change.
I like that. A big part of my experiencing self-doubt is at the schools I went to, a lot of people were playing more like standard repertoire for percussion, and I was playing stuff that's more kind of contemporary and weirder, and I'd be in front of my peers performing, and in my head the whole time I'm thinking like, they probably think this is stupid, they probably don't like this, you know, and then after a while, well, of course, then you get to the end of the performance and people clap and they're like, that was so cool, and then I'm like, no, you're just saying that. There's no way you think it's cool. But I was like, after a while, I kind of had to ask myself, like, do I think it's cool? Do I enjoy the repertoire? And that's kind of I realized it's really about. And if other people like it, then that's great. But so that's kind of what's helped me with like the self-doubt, is just kind of like doing it kind of more for myself, I guess, as far as picking repertoire, or kind of what I believe in terms of music, the music that I like to pick.
Yeah, I think finding your niche is so important in many ways, but I think it ties into performance anxiety too. I remember first learning that I was more drawn to contemporary works, and that I felt quite comfortable playing a lot of this stuff, whereas my peers felt a lot more comfortable playing standard rep, and it was completely opposite for me. And neither is better or right. It's just kind of interesting. Eventually, you know, as a professional musician, eventually you'll find yourself in a place where you do have control over that. In school, sometimes you have to play what the professors assign. On another note, I'll just say, back to the self-worth idea, I think it can be a lifelong journey, an important one, to learn to not tie your self-worth to what you do. And I think that's especially true for musicians, because it is so a part of us and our personalities from such a young age. And just always having this understanding and developing mindset of, you know, my self-worth is not determined by how I play this piece, how I perform today, what my teacher thinks about it, finding larger things in life and larger purpose, so that you don't become too sidelined by any one thing in your musical career.
Yeah. I think that's really important. All right, the next question. How about we go, let's start with Dr. Rushing, and we'll go the other way.
Oh,
this
don't make me
time.
anxious.
And we'll change. Okay, so the next question, what was a pivotal moment or performance where you learned something important about managing your anxiety?
Well, I feel like many of the things I've said already is sort of my answer to that. Recognizing that the perception of it is so personal, and that actually with a little bit of time and reflection, the performances that I've had in the past that I thought didn't go well actually went quite well, trying to understand that in the present. And I'll just reiterate, the normalization of performance anxiety has been a very big help for me. And I think the more that we talk about it, like, that helps with imposter anxiety or imposter syndrome as well. Because if we're just hiding these thoughts inside ourselves, it can feel very isolating. So I really have nothing new to say, but just to reiterate a couple points.
This is not to get too tangential, hopefully. Does anyone know the Allman Brothers Band? Or at least maybe heard of them. I've played in an Allman Brothers tribute band for a couple years, and this band started in like the 70s. And so now when there's a tribute band concert, it's the people who listened to the band 50 years ago, so, you know, like older folks, 60s and above, let's say. And of course I'm on stage and I'm like kind of worried about what I'm doing, and I think I missed a drum or played something wrong or something. But always after the concert, it'd be these people like, I remember when I first heard the Allman Brothers, and they were just really super stoked to like be kind of brought back to that time in their life. And they weren't worried about like wrong notes or like I played this cymbal instead of that cymbal. And it was like a very different environment than classical music. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't think anyone in the audience has like the score, and you know, I was wondering if I played the right notes. They're just kind of there to feel something and kind of escape and go back to some other time of their life, or just kind of leave reality totally. So that kind of took a lot of the pressure off for me, I think. when I perform.
As the non-performer up here, I think for me, the biggest thing that has been influential in my trying to manage the anxiety is just the constant that's not the right way of saying it. The constant support from people about saying, it's your perspective, right? What you do is from your lens, your specialty. And for me, that came in doing my first research article. I am the only person that is going to know and be as well versed in my area of expertise compared to people that are going to be reading it, or the niches that I have. And once published, then the feedback that came in was representative of that. But really trying to figure out how to calm that inner critic really becomes a huge aspect of that. And we all have the inner critic. So really it's not so much as any one particular way, it's all of these things just coming together. So it's the support beforehand, but also the support that comes in after as well. It's not necessarily just my own perception.
I can't really nail down one pivotal moment, but I kind of have a category. If I would perform alongside, let's say maybe some people when I was in school, people that were a couple years older than me, just a few steps ahead of my development, I remember playing a viola duo with one of my friends who's an amazing violist. She's in the National Symphony Orchestra in DC now. We played this fun viola duo, and I had been playing, it was on my recital, it was the last piece. So I was like warmed up, I had gotten, through my whatever stuff, and she was just going on the first time. She's like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. I'm like, why are you nervous? But then we got on stage and she just focused, and I was like, oh, that's what I gotta do. And I got to play with some of my chamber music mentors, and it's the same thing. They just like, okay, leave it backstage, cry about whatever later. I had a great privilege to study with a woman named Karen Tuttle, who is widely considered the best viola teacher of our time. And there's a workshop about her teaching, and she actually went to the first few. She passed about 15 years ago. I remember talking to her. I was like, Ms. Tuttle, how are you? It's good to see you. She goes, I'm nervous to speak. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is about her thing. Like, she can say whatever she wants, and she's so nervous. So, yeah, that's what I have.
Mine is similar, to kind of realizing that when you get on stage, you can like kind of choose to just like to leave the thoughts. And I know, we say this, and some people think like, how do you just choose that? But it's like, it's almost choosing not to care in that moment. In my master's, my first recital, actually, it was the only recital I had. It was a month before COVID, so I got really lucky that my recital got planned a month before the COVID lockdown, because everyone else had to do their recitals from their living rooms. I remember how I was exhausted. Right? I was working at Starbucks in my master's. I would get to work at 4 a.m. And then I get off work and I go straight to class, and concerts in the evenings, all that stuff. And I just remember being so exhausted. I was practicing and doing everything I knew I needed to do, but I didn't really have the energy to really care. I was like, let's just get this over with, let's just do it. And that was the only performance I think I've ever had that, like, is it over? But I loved all of the music I put on that recital. I loved that music. And I got to the point, I was just so tired that when I walked on stage, I thought to myself, well, I know I've prepared as much as I can prepare. I did all the work that I can. I can't do anything else. So let me just enjoy this music, because I picked all of the music that I love. And I just enjoyed myself. And I didn't let myself really care because I was too tired to care. And then after that, when I was listening back, I realized, wait, that went really well and I started like kind of figuring out what was the difference, and it was just that I allowed myself to trust that I was as prepared as I could have been, right? The only other way I could have prepared more was if I didn't sleep, which is important. Take care of yourself, eat your meals, sleep,
Hydrate.
go take walks, be in the sun sometimes. It's good for us.
Sun.
Yeah.
Sunscreen.
Yeah, sunscreen. But that was like the moment where I was like, wait a second. If I walk on stage and I trust that I prepared as much as I can, things happen. They will happen. But why not enjoy myself while I'm there? And so now every time I try to do that now. And it's part of me maybe it's me not caring, but I do care a lot still. So it's just like turning it off for a second. I don't know.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to finish too. It's been so helpful for me to keep in mind what my purpose is as a performer, as some of you alluded to already. It's not about proving ourselves. It's not about proving that we can play this piece or look how well I can play or look how flashy I am. It's about either the piece itself, trying to convey something through it, trying to help someone see a different perspective through your music, tell a story, whatever it is. It's so important to keep that in mind. And for me, it's been really helpful for me to make non-musician friends, because I think we're so insulated with what we do, and it's good to have people that have the same perspective as you, but also to have friends who are coming to your concerts who are going to think the world of you, no matter what you do, because it is just all beyond what they can ever imagine doing themselves. So it's important to make other friends and meet other people outside of what we do, and I think you'll find that useful in your own performances when they are there to enjoy it with you.
Start now.
Yeah. There are so many old folks happy to be your friends. I have so many older folks in Amarillo who come to my concerts regularly, and it's been so wonderful. And like folks in the hockey community who have never been to a classical piano recital before, and just seeing it through their eyes has been wonderful as a performer.
Yeah, it's really important. All right, last question. How do you handle a performance that didn't go as planned? What's your recovery process? Does anyone want to start? I have a 24-hour rule. I give myself 24 hours to mope. Be as sad as I want. I'm gonna go get that tub of ice cream and I'm gonna eat it. And I'm gonna watch a rom-com. And I'm gonna do all of the things that bring me joy. I'm gonna do all of the things that make me happy. If that means being in the garden, I'm gonna go in the garden. Or if I wanna go for a hike, or if I wanna take my dog for a walk. I'm not thinking about, I have that performance next week, I need to practice for it. No, I'm putting it away. 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, I reevaluate, okay? This didn't go as planned. What were my weaknesses and what could I have done better? And then I just, all right, what do I do to be better next time? And that's it,
Oh gosh, I'm still working on that, but I will just say this. I don't think any of my performances have ever gone completely as planned, and that in both a good and bad way, or that. How do I recover? Well, I guess it just depends on the performance, because when I was taking a lot of orchestra auditions, I would just, kind of know what went well, where did I feel nervous, and I knew I was like, okay, I'm gonna play Don Juan again, and again, and again. I think for me it just depends on the performance, and it's a journey, because you'll figure out some things and then those will work, and some things then you come back to the same things you're working on. Yeah, I should make it better.
I also give myself time to emotionally come to terms with what I may not have seen as the best performance of my life or the best experience of my life. When I look at things that don't go as planned, I kind of connect it to the grieving process. So recognizing that there is going to be time where we don't necessarily understand what happened or why it happened, but the more time that we go away from that experience, the more time we get to reflect, the more time we get to build on that. So as far as the recovery process, I also give myself, I don't necessarily go 24 hours, but I recognize that there is a time frame where I allow myself to, this is not going to sound great, be harsh with myself. And I think that for me is actually an important process because that helps to re-solidify my self-worth when I get to that stage. Now, there's a fine balance between getting sucked into that negativity. So you really need to be aware of where you stand if that is the direction you choose to look at this process. But yeah, kind of going back on what's been shared all this hour, having that growth orientation and recognizing the importance that crap's going to happen sometimes. And that's okay.
For me, I think a lot of us have been in situations where like either recitals or ensembles where we have the dress rehearsal right before the concert, and it's like, oh no. And then the concert is like incredible. Have we all kind of experienced that at some point? I've experienced that with at least one of my recitals, and like after the dress rehearsal, the oh no dress rehearsal, I just went and like took a walk. I was like, I could kind of go and think about everything that went wrong and kind of stress out more about my recital that's in a couple of days because of this dress rehearsal. But I was like, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to kind of, think about it and acknowledge that it happened. Because I kind of feel like with performance, we can practice, no matter however much we want to. When we go on stage, we're kind of just rolling the dice. There's so much stuff we can't control about a performance on our own side, the external side, like audience members, crying babies, sneezing and coughing and stuff. But like, we can just kind of go in and roll the dice and see what happens. But I guess my recovery process has been kind of just to kind of be gracious to myself and just kind of understand like that maybe it didn't go as well as I wanted it to. Hopefully the next one will, which sounds kind of Disney Channel-ish, but that's honestly it's kind of where I'm at, I guess.
I've found some solace in learning that the pressure of the performance does not always correlate with the anxiety. It would make sense in my very direct brain that if the performance is higher stakes, I'm going to be a lot more anxious. And if it's a lower stakes, I'm not going to be anxious at all. And that's not been my experience.
That's very true.
I've had a number of performances. There's one I'm thinking of a few years ago before Triptych, my trio, went on tour. We played at a small school to sort of kick off the tour. There were 3 people in the audience, and I was so incredibly anxious. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, there's no way that I can play this at XYZ school a few days from now, and there's going to be hundreds of people in the audience. And I don't know why this is the way that it is, but it's not always correlated like that. And so that's given me some hope and understanding, and it's helped me shed those feelings of worry, just knowing that.
One last thing I'm going to say about this. I really like everything that's been said, but from the opposite perspective, I once had a friend sit me down and say, when people come up to you after your recitals and they compliment you, they mean them. They mean it. Whether you believe it or not, because I think all of us, as we've said, a lot of times there's rarely a performance that we are 100% like, that was my best performance. It's pretty rare that is ever a thought. Something always happens, right? Even if we're like just generally happy about it. But even if we're not, it's really important to learn how to take a compliment, just for the respect of others too. And I say this as somebody who struggled with it, right? And my friend was like, when someone compliments you, say thank you. I know you don't believe it, but you need to at least, acknowledge, and when you're that person giving the compliment, when you're giving someone a compliment, you really want them to believe you. Like, even if you know that they have performance anxiety, like, I really want you to know that I thought you did great. Like, I really do. And if you're watching them stand there, like, you're just like, please listen to me. So, it actually helped me to believe them more by like learning how to just thank you. And then later I would think about it. I'm like, yeah, that actually did go well, didn't it? That compliment they gave me, and I listened back, and yeah, you start to believe it. So just thought I would note that, because I haven't noticed that, from the teaching perspective too. We want you to know when we're complimenting you too. Like, we want you to listen to us too. Just as much as we want you to listen to ourselves. Yeah.
And I'll add to that as well. Like when you're practicing a piece and you're practicing it every day and every day and every day, you've heard yourself play it, let's say 1,000 times. So when you play it for a performance, you might kind of rank it somewhere from first to 1,000th. When someone hears you for the first time, that's the best time they've heard you play it. So you can kind of believe that, like, they're going to be paying attention to a lot more of the positive stuff, where you're going to be a lot more critical as we're taught to be. But it kind of, again, hopefully that takes some of the pressure off of a performance. Like, they don't know what your other 999 times sounded like. So.
We're always going to have our best run in the practice room. Almost always. Not always, but
Most of the time.
most of the time. It's important to know that. The practice room you and the stage you are not the same.
Yeah,
They're never going to be the
That's
same.
why it's so important to practice performing and not stopping. I think it's very important to record yourself as well, because even when I was doing that this morning with the Forsyth, when you hear that boop, it's like, oh.
Oh no.
So you just get used to it. Find comfort in the uncomfort, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trademark. Somebody must have said that before.
All right. So the last thing is just, do we have any other resources that help us a lot? That I've read a lot of books that I find to be really helpful. Like Atomic Habits is great. It's like, leave the judgment out of your routines. It's just, and then like the Talent Code. Don Green has a ton of great books, right? I think I have his audition success book in my office. I love it. So.
Don Green, Noah Kageyama, who's his protege, has a blog and a podcast. He's a bulletproof musician.
The podcast is great.
Yeah, the podcast is great.
And all of his podcasts are like in blog version too. Yeah.
As far as resources go, I would advocate for recognizing the resources that you currently have, your hobbies, the things that you enjoy doing outside of music. A lot of times we take those for granted and can recognize the resources in those.
In addition to the Don Green books, Audition Success, Performance Success, Inner Game of Tennis is a fun one. There's also Inner Game of Music, but it's a much larger book. So if you like shorter books, Inner Game of Tennis, super applicable to kind of any art form, really, not just tennis.
2 more book recommendations: The Perfect Wrong Note by William Westy, and A Soprano on Her Head by Eloise Ristad.
I've heard that.
We should have a book club.
There we go. Then I'll finally read most of these.
Audible.
Does anyone have any questions for us?
I don't know, I have another book recommendation.
Okay.
It's So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. The idea is not being so good that they can't ignore you. The idea is that passions kind of don't exist, and it kind of takes work at one thing to actually fully enjoy it. So take with that what you will.
That's fascinating. To make a list. I have to make a whole list.
He
Any other
started a good
questions?
podcast too.
Yeah.
What?
The
He's-
Deep Life. Cal Newport has a good podcast.
Awesome. That's cool. Yeah.
How do you kind of like cope in a performance when something did go wrong? Like you ended up not only having 10 minutes before the performance to warm up, or something like that.
Oh.
I think accepting that fact.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Just accept the reality that you walk into that has happened to me recently. Yes.
Yeah.
These things happen too. But, when I interviewed here, lunch ran late. I didn't have time. I walked in, got my instrument out, and walked right on stage. And I was like, wow. Here we go. It's just kind of like we could think about all the things that could have gone right, or we could just go, straight into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of my friends audition for like military bands and orchestras and stuff, and in their audition process, sometimes they'll take some time to warm up, 30 minutes or whatever, and then do the thing. Sometimes they're like, what if I don't have time to warm up? Flight runs late or something, so they'll just set all the instruments up and then just play. It's kind of the preparation of kind of preparing for the worst case scenario can be helpful sometimes. And then if you get to warm up, then it's like, okay, cool, not so bad.
Kind of that acceptance aspect, recognizing that it's in the past and you can't change the past is a huge part of it. I remember in my undergrad, I was an organist as my major, and I had to play Bach chorale because I had to play a Bach. I gave him some very choice notes that he does not use in his music, completely unintentional, and when I finished with that piece, I went and ate an entire bundle of bananas, because bananas are supposedly supposed to make you feel more calm, right? So recognizing that I can't change that past, but I can choose how I address the future, and in that moment, I chose to eat an entire bundle of bananas. And it calmed me down for a few seconds, at least, until I had to go back out. So finding ways to kind of change your mindset in the moment, but even more so, what comes after the fact is really what's important.
Yeah, there's a larger life skill and consideration of accepting the things that you have no control over, right? I think that's a larger idea than just in performance, but it's important all around.
Yeah.
What are y'all's day of routines before a big performance?
I usually teach class piano all day. But I found that actually does work well for me, similar to what Dr. Schury Peckham was saying. If I have too much time to ruminate, that doesn't work well for me. And I tried that. That's how my professor in undergrad approached things, and I tried that approach, and that wasn't good. So if I have something to keep me busy and feel productive and feel some meaning with after my morning run, of course, and then just a little bit of time between teaching and performance, a couple hours, then I'm good.
For me, it's if I have time that day to not do much and just kind of rest and be away from music or something, then I like to do that. If it's a day where I'm teaching or have a lot of things to do, then just try to eat well. And also, you might know more about the circadian rhythm than I do, most likely, but I think about 24 hours before my recital, or what time am I eating dinner the day before, so that I can eat dinner at the right time on the performance day, and I don't start having a duet with my grumbly stomach on stage, stuff like that. That's my sort of routine, I guess.
Lots of pacing. Back and forth. For anyone who's taken classes with me, they know when I'm anxious, because I do a lot of pacing. I do a lot of walking, which is not inherently bad, but it allows me to kind of ground myself from the ground up, which gets me into my head last, which is oftentimes where the anxiety stems from. So for me, it's anything that allows me to keep moving. Other things that I will do is I will deal with anything tactile. So a lot of sticking my hands into different textures so that I can just reground myself that way.
I think for me, it depends on what time of day the performance is. So I guess let's say if most of them usually are in the evening, I like to sleep in as much as I can. I mean, obviously, we have to most likely be teaching that day, but I like to have a few hours to myself. I like to walk. I don't like to lift on days of.
You mean lift?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not day of, or even day before. Even though I don't lift, that's kind of a strong word for what I do, but I like to get my heart rate up and then give it time to come down. So listen to the Beyonce, Britney Spears, and then put on Enya later on or something. Mentally prepare. I just do a lot of deep breathing before. This is really hilarious, but I heard one of my friends told me before I was a teacher at UNT, before she played once, she just screamed as loud as she could into her pillow, and I tried that before I played this very difficult Hindemith sonata last year, and it really helped. Actually, in the car on the drive over to, I was like,
I can only imagine being in the car next to you.
I I know. Well, I do it anyways at drivers.
I love
so.
that. I love
I
that.
was really hoping you said you brought the pillow with you and you did it backstage, and then other people would have heard
That
you.
would have been
heard
funny. That sounds like some contemporary piece. Go backstage and scream it to
Yeah, like I said earlier, I like to keep busy. The thing I do always make sure I do, I always warm up twice. I always warm up twice. And it's because if something happens to the second warm up, I want control over having warmed up,
That's true.
which has happened to me, like you get stuck with less performance time and you're like, so I've gotten in the routine of always warming up twice, and then if anything, that second time is like the extra time to like make sure, I have some mentors. I don't do this, but I don't nap. I'm not a napping, I just don't. I'm not that person. If I try to nap, I'll be out for 3.5 hours and I wake up it's like, what day is it? So I don't nap. But I have mentors that were very much like, I have to nap on performance day. Like there are people that do that out there. They're like, I need the hour. I need to go be in silence. I need to go, if you are that, like good.
I don't necessarily fall asleep, but I like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like if that's something that you need, that's also, an idea that a lot of people do. A lot of people do that. Any other questions? Yeah.
I was going to ask, is it true or a myth that you can over-practice before a performance? And at what time should you stop trying to re-practice the piece you're performing?
That's a hard one. Also, this is going to be our last question. I know it's a little bit late, but that's a hard one. I do think that there's a lot of people say this. A lot of people say like, oh, you don't want to like peak too soon, right? Have you guys heard that?
That's really hard to time at times.
It's hard to time. It's hard to I don't know. It's like you have to know that like everything that you're struggling with, you just have to keep, kind of climbing. But I think at some point you do have to trust yourself enough to stop pushing. Like you're gonna reach a limit where you're like, you know what? I think I'm not gonna keep climbing the mountain right now. I need to stay the course. I don't know.
If you find yourself practicing to the point that you make mistakes, for example, I've run through it 3 times and it's been perfect. Surely that's a fluke. Let me try one more time. And then the mistakes start coming out. I would say I think that's when it's going too far. And I've experienced that myself because it's like I want something to prove me wrong and to prove the thoughts right if I'm not prepared. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When I record for competitions or anything, when I do recording projects, I do give myself a max. Like ahead of time, it's usually 3 or 4. And then I stop for that same reason, because more things happen. And I found over the years of recording projects, usually the first or the second is always the better one, the best one.
That's very true.
Yeah, so it's kind of just like knowing when to stop, put it down and go home. Yeah.
I also think a good question at that point to ask is, what is being sacrificed for the sake of over practicing? Are you losing sleep? Are you losing dinner time? What is being sacrificed in order to continue practicing? Because music is a balance of everything. It's not only the skill, the technicality, it's also everything else that creates our ability to do that. So being aware of how it's affecting other areas of our life is critical.
Well, thank you all. You're always more than welcome. Thank you. We're always more than welcome to answer any questions you have.
Yeah.
So please always feel free to email or anything.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we take a panel photo?
Panel photos.
Yeah.
Panel selfie.